before he left office, Jay Johnson, his Secretary of Homeland Security, named elections critical infrastructure. It caused this problem between the North and the South and the states and the federal government and so forth. We didn't want the federal government stepping in and telling us how to run elections. Okay? Trump's people came in, and a month afterwards, John Kelly, the new Secretary of Homeland Security, validated what Jay Johnson had done. So whether we liked it or not, we were stuck with elections as critical infrastructure. And so we decided it was time to get on board and not fight the federal government to figure out what critical infrastructure meant. So this is going to be a long answer to why they did that, because it took us over a year and a half, almost 2 years, to figure out why the federal government had done that. So, okay.
Told you.
What we've got going is not just Revolutionary War. Don't think about our 1776. This is more on the big scheme of things. So the pen is mightier than the sword kind of stuff. The spirit is the physical as 3 is to 1. That's Napoleon. If you have the mind to go do something, it's more important than having the physical capability. It's the will that wins out. Clausewitz, war is a continuation of politics by other means. The indirect approach, Liddell Hart, okay, the major victories, the best victories are won through the indirect approach, not the frontal assault type things. And so Revolutionary War doesn't conform to battle damages assessments. It's not physical stuff, okay, it's an ideology, and it adapts, and you can't attack an ideology. Okay, you can attack the people and that sort of thing, but you can't go attack an ideology. So I refer you, we can go attack Al-Qaeda, we can take out Osama bin Laden, and what happens? ISIS pops up somewhere else. That's an example of it, okay? Vietnam, we won every battle. They never beat us on the battlefield, but who won that war, okay? So what you got going is these competing ideologies between Russia and the United States. And so we confuse sometimes, communism versus democracy, communism versus capitalism and so forth. Communism is just this ideology over there, okay? We've got liberalism, capitalism, democracy, and so forth. That's what's going on here. So we've had 3 Cold Wars with Russia. It's been going on for 100 years, all right? What I'm going to get around to is there's nothing new under the sun. What they're doing to us today, they've been doing for 100 years. So here's some examples, all right? The Great War, that's when Russia, the Bolshevik Revolution, began. U.S. wasn't quite dominant in the world yet. We were still getting our feet underneath us. And they started meddling with us, all right? Well, the 3 Cold Wars, that's the first. The second is 46 to 88. And then the last one is, from about the time of Bosnia and the expansion of NATO to today. So let's take a look at each of those real quickly. Moscow creates the Communist International here, okay? And it urges the U.S. Communist Party to pursue regime change here in the United States, okay? So they're pushing that. We don't recognize Russia until 1933, and we say, if you'll quit meddling with us, we'll recognize you. Well, we recognized them, but they didn't stop meddling with us, okay? Here's their propaganda. Peace becomes an implement of, it's a propaganda weapon for them. So anything that's communism is peace-loving, anything that's capitalism is warmongering in their ideology, all right? So they start masquerading military offensives as postures of peace. So you see this doublespeak. That's where George Orwell got his 1984 idea, okay? It's doublespeak. You'll be given a gun, you learn the art of the war. You don't win by good intentions, you do it by disarming people. A number of countries, this will all lead to revolution. And every peace program is a deception for revolutionary struggle. Here, there was a split within Russia itself between Trotsky and Stalin. Trotsky said, all out, fight all the time, don't ever capitulate, fight, fight, fight. Stalin was more of a realist. He said, hey, we got to be able to coexist. So we see in World War II a coexistence. But you see this zigzagging of what truth is. Peace is good, war is bad. And you see Russia going back and forth between this revolutionary youth front, we're going to train the youth to fight, to a non-aggression pact, to invading Poland, to attacking U.S. isolation. You see it going back and forth. There is no real truth. We're going to change truth to whatever fits the moment. So the Second Cold War is after World War II. There were actually a couple of years of peace or truce between us, all right? But once it was time to divide up Europe, then Russia wanted us to get out of there. And so you see this division in Berlin and so forth. Churchill says an iron curtain has fallen over Europe, okay? Russia starts, we start the UN, and they start this World Peace Council, and they soon get expelled because they were so, extreme or whatever. You get into the 50s with Sputniks and the space race, Berlin Wall, and so forth. Here are some examples of their postures of peace, okay? Defensive measures. Are these defensive? Let's see if this works here. Does this look like a defensive measure to you? This is them rolling into Hungary, 1956. It doesn't look like a real peaceful intrusion for me. It looks like a military. Okay, here you're into the Czech Republic, 1968. And then into Afghanistan, 1979. Khrushchev, we must push them to the grave. You Americans are gullible. You won't accept communism outright, so we'll feed you small doses. And one day you'll wake up and find that you've got communism. Right? We'll conquer you without firing a shot. That's Khrushchev. Big time Vietnam. Some of you are in here, maybe vets, remember it well. Okay? They just rolled out, throughout the United States, and peace becomes a weapon to disarm us materially, saying, don't proliferate the arms and shipments and everything to Vietnam, but it's also to disarm us psychologically. Students for a Democratic Society organized protests all over America. These are all either started by or exacerbated by Russian influences. You see all these, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and so forth. Now, there's a split. Just remember how Trotsky and Stalin split. There's a split here in the United States between the Communist Party. They wanted to go after this bigger issue of going after the United States as a society. The Socialist Workers' Party had a single issue, just withdraw from Vietnam. So you see, Trotsky said fight us all the time. Stalin said we'll coexist. You can see a split within the Communist Party here inside the United States. You need both a defense and offense. Like dark needs light to understand one another. The defense is peace. Okay, we're going to disarm and love, sing Kumbaya and all that. Offense, you need to go actually get inside, infiltrate, and then do something on the other side to change the outcome. All right. Mobilization Committee. There was, in the United States, there was a genuine pacifist movement, but it was small, it was insignificant, or not any of the large demonstrations that if you remember the 60s or have seen film clips and so forth of the 60s, any large mass demonstration, Russia was part of it, behind it, making it worse, and so forth. Here are just some of the examples. Now, you're going to see this slide again later in today's terms. Okay, so remember this slide. Here are just some of the different communist-backed organizations from the Vietnam days. Okay, the Democratic National Convention, 1968. Look at that, 253 from Chicago, 292 more were from outside the state, 10 were from outside the country. Remember that one. Okay, Mueller report today, outside the country, Russian activists coming in, 25 military operatives come inside the United States to stir up trouble in today's world, 2016 election. Same thing was going on back in the 60s. Nothing new under the sun, folks. Do we have volume on this? I'll tell you what he's saying. This is a KGB agent, defected in 1983. He's telling us about the KGB budget. He says that 15% is basically what you think of as James Bond kind of stuff, kind of espionage. 85% is active, aggressive subversion. We're going to actively, openly come inside your country and mess with you. That's what it means. Okay? That's what he's telling us. They're doing that in 1983. That's Cold War era. KGB tactics. When do you think Putin was trained? 1980s. Okay? 1970s, 1980s. So Putin, black belt, judo, karate expert, all that sort of stuff, KGB trained, is doing the same thing that they did to us during the Cold War as they're doing to us now. Okay. This is my own personal experience with this. Okay? Caught between the superpowers, between the U.S. and Russia, all right? Panama, we actually captured insurgents on the hillsides in Panama, Russian agents inside Panama with maps, and it showed what was communist, what was capitalist in Latin and South America, and it was about 50-50. So if you're a country in Latin America, do we want to go with the Soviets or do we want to go with the Americans? That was 1989. A couple years later, I'm in Peru. We're fighting the Sendero Luminoso, or they are, and we're helping train them, okay, the Shining Path. And in the Peruvian military, one country, their military, their army was 90% Russian, trained tactics, weapons, and 10% American. Their navy was, or their navy was 50-50, and their air force was 90% American, 10% Russian. So in one country, you had the three militaries siding with one or the other. They got to pick their own. All right. They didn't know whether Americans were going to win out in capitalism or whether Russians and communism was going to win out. Playing out in the 90s. Okay. In the 90s, after the wall comes down and everything, Soviet Union implodes. It's now back to Russia. We start pushing the promotion of democracy. So just like we think they're meddling in our affairs, they think that we're meddling in their affairs. In 2000, that's a typo. 2001. It's 2011. Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, meddles in the Russians' elections against Putin. So 2016 is get even time, all right, and other things that are going on, all right. Some more defensive, so-called defensive operations, Crimea in 14, and Ukraine today. All right, political spectrum, real quick. Here's on the right, okay. You've got conservatives, aristocracies, all the way out to totalitarian regimes, okay. Here it is on the left, okay. Liberalism, socialist communisms, and so forth. Okay, when you put it all together, that's what you've got. We tend to think of things on a spectrum of left to right. Here's the reality. Okay, over here you start getting towards authoritarianism. I can't say that word. Over here you got the same sort of thing. The further you go to the left and the right, the more you got towards one person calling the shots. And so here we tend to think of Nazis over here on the right. Remember, it's the National Socialist Workers' Party is what Nazi stands for. It's socialism, okay? So you really have Nazism on both left and right as an example of the authoritarianism at work. So this is what you really have, is you have the far left and the far right, really more like a horseshoe coming together towards a totalitarian regime, and your democracy is on the end of it, their end of it. All right? So that's why you have, in today's world, right here, Wall Street Journal or whatever, okay, the new Beijing-Moscow axis. Why would communist, Russia and China be working together? Because of this right here, okay? It's totalitarianism, authoritarianism, and they are more aligned than up here on the democracies. So what Russia's up to? Three-dimensional chess. There's the chess masters. 10 of the top 20 chess players in the entire world are Russian. Okay? There's a reason for that. Okay? They like to think deeply and all this kind of stuff to outsmart their opponents. And that's what they're doing with us here in the Russian meddling in our elections, is trying to outthink us. And so their immediate first dimension, they want to affect the candidacy. They want to be for Trump, take down Hillary, something like that. Okay? They want us to question a particular election legitimacy, or they want to promote a desired outcome. Now, there could be a difference. Think Russia may want Trump. Do you think China wants Trump right now? Not necessarily. So there are some differences over there. All right. Midterm, they don't want me to trust you, you to trust me. Blacks don't trust whites, rich don't trust poor, class warfare. They want us to get us to turn on each other. They want to polarize the politics. They want to push the right further to the right. They want to push the left further to the left. They don't want anybody to trust the government. And then long term, they want to promote Russian interests. They want to divide the West. They want to get rid of NATO. Three-dimensional chess. So they're working on all of those while we're sitting here worried, can they hack a machine at the hackathon in Las Vegas? We're sitting here playing one-dimensional checkers. They're playing three-dimensional chess with us. They're at asymmetric warfare. Asymmetric warfare is the cyber attacks that you all know so well. Disinformation. Drones. Did you know that they've actually, ISIS has used hobby-shop drones to drop grenades on us in Iraq? So here we have air superiority. We spend billions of dollars with our Air Force and get the hottest fighters. We can put up shields. We can put up anti-missile stuff. We control the air. And they buy a $100 drone from Hobby Lobby and stick a grenade on it, fly it over, and we were totally helpless. We didn't know how to fight against it. Now we're coming online and defending, but when they first started flying against it, that's asymmetric warfare. Okay? It's like when a submarine tries to attack a helicopter and vice versa, okay? Doesn't work real good. Two different platforms, okay? Here's what General Thomas had to say. We had no answer. An absolutely asymmetric counter by the enemy underneath our air superiority. And you're going to see how that plays out in the cyber world as we move into it. A couple quick examples. Election meddling, real quick, in the Ukraine. Totally BS right here. What they did on election night is they took a screenshot, changed the results, pushed it out to get everybody to distrust the elections in Ukraine. This guy right here didn't have 30% of the vote. He had 1% of the vote. Less than 1% of the vote. But that's what they pushed out so that everybody in Ukraine, okay, this is pro-Russia, this is pro-Europe. They said that this nationalist over here had gotten 30% of the vote just to tick off everybody over here on this side. Total BS. And they knew they were going to get caught the next day, but it was enough to cause confusion. Right now, we've just had the election in Kentucky, okay, Beshear and Bevin and so forth. And if they had just changed the results, how would you know? Who do you know who to trust and whatnot? That's the power. That's why hack one machine when you can hack, a news agency or election results of the Secretary of State's website. That's where the threat is, not on hacking a machine. Okay, so they just want to promote instability, get protests, distrust, and so forth. But it's not just in elections. See, we get all wrapped around the axle, especially we as Secretary of States get wrapped around the axle about elections. It's a lot more than elections, folks, what the Russians are up to. This Malaysian airliner that got shot down, they're dealing with the Olympics. We're going to talk about the Olympics in a minute. In Estonia, they joined NATO in 2004. The Russians didn't like it. In 2007, they moved a statue of a Russian war soldier from World War II from downtown Tallinn to an outside the city cemetery. The Russians didn't like it, took offense at it. The very next day, they launched the first nation-to-nation cyber attack just to mess with the Estonians. The Malaysian shoot-down, they hacked it to change the narrative to confuse the citizens. Who did it? We all know, you'll see here in a minute, we all know it was the Russians, okay? In the Olympics, all right, the politics has been going on for quite some time. A lot of different protests, boycotts, and so forth. There are just some examples I want to highlight down here. Because of the Russian invasion in Afghanistan, I showed you the film clip earlier, the very next year Jimmy Carter boycotted the Moscow Olympics. Then they retaliated 4 years later. They boycotted the Russian Olympics. That's going to play out here in a minute. In 1980, when they had the Olympics in Moscow, it was called the Chemist's Game because all the Russians were doping. All right, 43 medals over time have been stripped. More than 30% of all the medals from all the countries in the world, 30% of them, more than that, have been removed because the Russians have been doping. All right, I'm sorry. Caught doping in 2010, 2012, 2014. Folks, if you haven't seen it, watch the documentary called Icarus. And it shows you how this all played out right here. All right. Then in 2015, they got suspended and Russians banned in 2018. Watch this documentary if you're interested in this at all. It's powerful. Here's the connection between the Olympics and elections. It's the people working for the Russian intelligence. All right? These three guys right here involved in the anti-doping efforts, all right, to basically change the results of. What they did in the movie Icarus, and it's true, a true documentary. The Russians, since it was in Sochi, they had a little brick in the corner of the building, and at night they would pull that brick out and they take out the hot urine from inside and pass in positive or good urine and stick it back inside, and we all exposed it all. Okay, that's how they got all, and so they got all their gold medals, from doping and so forth. Well, the people that were doing that, these guys right here. When we bust them over here wanted in the FBI for interference in our 2016 elections, look who shows up. Same guys. So when they start proving their hacking methods over here in the Olympics, they just bring it to work over here in the U.S. elections. They don't even try to hide some of this, all right? Greetings, citizens of the world. We announced the start of this Olympics. We're going to tell you how Olympic medals are won. We hacked the World Anti-Doping Agency databases, and we were shocked at what we saw. Are they going to tell us that they were shocked because the Russians were doping? No, they're going to change the narrative. We will start with the U.S. team, which has disgraced it by tainted victories. We will also disclose exclusive information about other National Olympic teams. Wait for sensational proof of our famous athletes taking doping substances anytime soon. What they're talking about is Williams. and now it's Simone Biles, okay, the great American athletes. They're saying that they've been doping. So that's the message they're going to put out to the world, all right? All of this, because of this activity, remember the basis for this class? Why U.S. named elections critical infrastructure, okay? The military started catching on in about 2014. The Army had a cyber command, then it became the whole U.S. military cyber command. All right, we have changed back in my day, all right, from active defense and airline battle. About 2010, we realized there was a whole lot more than the Army, Navy, Air Force. Okay, now we're starting to talk space. Specifically, just a year ago, I keep hitting the wrong button. Cyber, space, cyber. We now recognize that cyber is just as important as the Army, Navy, Air Force, and perhaps even more so. Okay, when we start talking about all this stuff here, okay, we're talking multi-domain operations. Okay, and we start talking about penetrate, disintegrate, exploiting in the cyber world. All right, we know the center of gravity is the internet, low cost, high impact, and this is the way the Russians are doing it. They've weaponized the internet, and they're doing it through social media. That's how you change public perception, is through social media. Why would they spend any money on a fighter nowadays? No reason to. A whole lot more effective to just send out messages over this. You're going to change the American public's perception a whole lot more with this than you are with an attack by a military fighter or whatever, okay? So propaganda is old as war itself. Just the new weapon is the internet, mobile phones, social media, and so forth. And it's intensified by artificial intelligence and so forth, all right? The tactical employment, we've talked about some of these, but I want to go through a couple of these so that you get the feel that it's a whole lot more than the Olympics. Here it is in real world. Folks, this is the Netherlands a year ago, and this is the actual mobile team. Now, we think of the Russians as being this all-powerful, great, whatever in this world. They make mistakes just like the rest of us. Check out this guy right here. When you zoom in on that, you can actually read his name and so forth. So they weren't that slick, all right? But this is their mobile team. This is their hacker. This is like you guys, except the smart guys, cyber folks, coming into the airport in the Netherlands to do an operation. All right? But the Dutch were on top of it. They caught him, well, as they set up shop, they caught him, all right? So it wasn't, what their target was in the Netherlands was this Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, because they were investigating some of the Olympic doping and so forth in the World Anti-Doping Agency. Here was the actual car that they had rented and drove to the operation. You can see all the stuff that they were carrying with them. And the beauty of, or not the beauty of this, but the scary part of this is these guys were nimble. They were Urals kind of smart to be able to set up, hack this stuff, and change it as it came in and went out. And one of the FBI agents was describing to me in another operation, setting up outside a hotel room. And so some guy, novice like me, goes in and signs on. I think I'm getting on the hotel, internet. It's going out to their car. They're watching everything, and then they're routing it back through and making it look like it's the hotel. I see a lot of heads nodding and so forth. So you got to be careful. I'm preaching to the choir here, but you got to be careful. If you got anywhere around something sensitive, the Russians could be sitting there listening to you and so forth. So we caught on to what they were up to there. They were supposed to leave there and go to Switzerland because there was another conference going on that they were going to hack and so forth. A lot of good intel came from this operation. Here were actual photos of the surveillance. This was the building that they were actually trying to listen into and so forth. At the same time, they were then supposed to go on to Malaysia and hack into a conference where they were changing the narrative on the shoot down of the Malaysian airliner, killed 200 and some people, almost 300 people, so that it wouldn't be pinned on the Russians. It was going to be pinned on somebody else, the insurgents and so forth. Anti-doping, we've talked about that a little bit. This was the conference they were going to go to in Switzerland after they were done in The Hague. Here it is in the United States. Set up a completely, 100% false disinformation and attack on a Russian or a chemical plant down in Louisiana. Put it out on social media, called the news agencies, had everybody geared up, people staying, sheltering in place in their homes and so forth. Totally fake. And they were just doing it, we think, to check out first responders and who was going to respond, FBI, that sort of thing. Just testing us out. All right? Disinformation, folks. Here's some real-world examples in the election arena. So we've talked Olympics, we've talked doping, we've talked all kinds of stuff. Here it is in the Olympics, in my world, okay? So they take a pro-Stacey Abrams ad running for governor in Georgia. They put the word communist, Muslim Brotherhood as simple photoshopping. But if this is the first thing you ever see about Stacey Abrams, are you going to have the favorable impression of her? Probably not, all right? So that's how they're messing with our heads, not with the voting machines. They're messing with our heads. Here it is. Check the date, November 12th. It's 4 days after the election. So they're not trying to change the outcome of the election in 2016. They're trying to change your perception as to whether Trump was appropriately elected or not, okay? So they put people on the streets of New York pro-Trump, and then Trump is not my president, put them on the same place, same time on the streets of New York City to fight with one another. That is meddling in our elections. Here it is. Islam. See, they're using our strengths against us. Freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of assembly. Freedom of assembly is putting people on the streets of New York City, putting people on the streets of Houston. Religion. Pro-Islam, anti-Islam to get us to fight with one another. Here it is. They particularly went after the African American people, all right? Because the narrative is they didn't want Hillary Clinton, and they assumed that the African American community was going to vote for Hillary. So why hack and try to change votes? If you can just get the African Americans to stay home and not vote, those are votes that aren't going to Hillary. Okay, that's nuanced. That's three-dimensional. That's a sophisticated military-style propaganda. Psychological operation is what that is. Over here, here's Trump. Here's Hillary. I won't vote for the oppressors. Just stay home. Just don't participate. That's Russian meddling in our elections. And then oppression. Anytime you see the Confederate flag or police and you get the Blue Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter things going and that sort of stuff, you just don't want to trust, you don't want to know what to believe, you don't want to trust the government, you just want to stay home, lock yourself at home and so forth. That's messing with our heads, folks. Oh. If you hadn't seen that before, you can Google that on your own, okay? It's Jordan Peele. And folks, it used to be, only believe half of what you hear, and, or only half of what you see and nothing of what you hear. Now it's don't believe anything that you hear or see, okay? Because the deep fakes, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but a lot of the people that I show this to have never seen this sort of thing. So anything that comes at us in the 2020 election could just be a deep fake, all right? So just be alert. We'll just have to let it play out there, I guess. You're going to have to help me move it on past that. While they're getting that fixed, any questions so far? Okay. There's another one about Nancy Pelosi, and it's called the wraparound smear. And if you just take the initial clip that a lot of times you see, it looks like she's telling her people to put out false information, report on it, get it to mainstream media, and then you've created a completely false narrative. So it sounds like she's telling people that's what to do. When you Google get the entire presentation, all right, she's saying that that's what the Republicans are doing to her. And the reason I show that is because that's what the Russians are doing to us. They're putting something out, false, then reporting on it in social media, and then having the mainstream media pick it up, and then saying, then citing the mainstream media report, well, it must be true. And I'll show you an example here in a minute. Okay? So this is how they do it. Pick a divisive issue, race, religion, so forth. Purchase social media, okay? Plan it, boost it, push it to the extremes, and then organize protests, okay, back to the freedom of assembly, and then create controversy to get media coverage. That's the game plan, all right? 23% of Americans in 2016 passed on a story made up by the Russians, completely fake, and we passed it on thinking it was real, all right? You can read the rest of that. Try to move people to the fringes, push the right further to the right, left further to the left. The idea is, back to judo and jiu-jitsu and all that stuff, martial arts, is you want to use the opponent's strength against you, okay? So if a guy's taking a punch at you, you just want to step aside and take that arm and keep pulling it, okay? Get his momentum and keep pulling him off guard. So you get the right, and they already want to go further to the right. They're watching Fox News and stuff. You want to take them further to the right. The left, you want to take them, they're watching CNN, you want to take them further to the left. And just get them to, you've heard America's never been as divided as we are today. It's because the Russians are back here pushing us in that direction, all right? So here's a real-world thing, the wraparound smear. The news story was that our CIA created the AIDS virus and planted it to go against smaller countries in Africa and so forth. So they planted that story, it's called Operation Infection, that the U.S. created the AIDS virus, and they planted it in 6 different languages in different countries around the world using Facebook, Twitter, all these different things, all right? So if you have that story out in all these different areas, do you think somebody's going to pick it up? Yeah. Some British network, Russian TV, or they're going to tell them to pick it up, and then Russian TV picks it up, Al Jazeera picks it up, and once they start reporting it, British picks it up, and then the U.S. CNN or Fox News picks it up. And then finally somebody said, wait, the CIA didn't start the AIDS virus. But by then it's already spread around the world. Okay? Remember I told you to see this picture again? How similar does that look to that? Okay? These are all, that's all the different ways Russia was pushing their propaganda inside the United States. What are they doing today? They're pushing their propaganda through all these different, it's not communist groups, it's Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. It's active subversion, active aggressive subversion against the United States, we created Facebook, we created Twitter, we created Google, all this stuff, and they're just using it against us. Just taking our momentum and turning it against us. Classic martial arts, Putin-trained KGB tactics. So they actually have algorithms and so forth set up so that anything that comes across the front page of the paper, if it hits enough papers, boom, that's an explosive issue. So Jeffrey Epstein, Charlottesville, Ferguson, San Bernardino, no matter what it is, and then they take it and they have people sitting in laboratories, in buildings, in St. Petersburg, in Moscow, sitting there, English speaking, and they sit there and they take that and how can we spin, Baltimore riots into something to get us to go fight each other? All right, and then they push it back out, and you are challenged. Just like somebody else might have a quota to make so many phone calls to sell insurance here, you have a quota. How many things can you push out on Facebook? How many likes? How can you use social media to push out these false narratives? That's what's going on. Now, it's not just Russia. Okay, they've been focused. We've talked about them, but you've got China. They're more interested in economics, not necessarily change our political structure. They want us as a trade partner. Okay. Iran, you've got ideological problems. You've got North Korea and their nutcase over there. They're pushing ransomware to get money to fund their weapons of mass destruction programs, okay? So there's a lot of bad actors out there, all right? I've talked about the Beijing-Moscow axis. Russia's kind of defending the West. China's defending the East. Russia's really focused more on military interests. They want to take us down from a military perspective. China wants to come over here and steal all of our economic interests. Some food for thought for you guys, all right? Whose responsibility is it to regulate the internet? Is that Facebook? We've called Mark Zuckerberg in front of Congress to see if he's going to do it self-imposed regulation, or should Congress get involved? Okay? And then what does that mean? What's the risk of regulation? Is that going to hamper Facebook, Google, and Twitter? Will we not get the next big advancement? Who owns the data? That's a big one. That's a real big one. We'll talk about that in a second. And then free speech, okay? The tech companies, the U.S. government, the states, each have their own piece of this. Is the internet like the FTC? Is it like the TV and radio and should be regulated, what you can say and not? Or is it more like a utility, okay, and should be regulated like utilities? Those are some of the questions we all have to answer. And you guys are in the best position to be answering some of that stuff, all right? You know whether if they do certain regulation, it's going to hamper the next gaming that everybody wants to produce, or the freedom of speech. And so right now what you have is, the Cambridge Analytica was behind that. That's what really prompted a lot of this, because it was used supposedly to help Trump's campaign, and so it's got the Democrats upset with helping the Trump campaign. You got the Republicans upset that Facebook is censoring the conservatives. Judge Roy Moore ran for Senate down in Alabama. There was a lot of false information out there, and Facebook knew it was false. But they knew if they took it down, there would be more fuel for the fire for the conservatives to say we got to regulate Facebook because they're anti-conservative. So you got this battle going on, all right, here in the United States. And to what extent Congress needs to step in. EU went ahead and got out in front of it. There was actually a case, a guy didn't like all the stuff that they had gathered on him, so they sued and went to the European courts and so forth. Over there, who owns your data? In Europe, who owns your data? You do, the individual. Over here, who owns it? The company, okay? You tend to think of Americans and individuality and so forth. Russia or Europe's far ahead of us. California, what's that? Yeah, please. California has taken on the European standard, the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation or whatever, okay? And they've passed regulations very similar to that. And so it's going to be supposedly come into effect here in the next year or two. And when it does, now you've got one state in the United States saying you own your data, or they have to take it down if you tell them to do so. And so what if California says you have 21 days, Facebook, to take it down? Minnesota comes in and says you have 14 days. And West Virginia comes in and says you have 2 days. How is Facebook ever going to survive trying to figure out 50? No. So it's time for Congress to step in and figure it out, okay? Now we're back to that question, the food for thought question. To what extent should Congress be in here regulating the internet? And I hope you guys can answer this a lot better or sooner and better than I can. Right now, just in the last month, you have Facebook coming out and Instagram saying, hey, we're just a platform for free speech. That's what America's all about, freedom of speech, First Amendment, okay? So we're not going to check it. If you're a politician, you can put out whatever lie you want. Twitter says, no, not so fast. No political ads, okay? Snapchat allows political and attack ads. So you start to see these social media companies starting to come out with different standards depending on their modeling and so forth. So we've gone from Russian meddling over to pushing America to the fringes. That's where this meddling is occurring. What is truth? Who gets to decide? Does Mark Zuckerberg get to decide what's truth and what stays up and what comes down? Or does somebody else? And so that all leads us down here to the self-media, self-regulation or government regulation. You guys have a lot better perspective on that than I do. Get involved with it. Conclusion. The U.S. named elections critical infrastructure to thwart Russia and other bad actors from that active, aggressive subversion that we've talked about throughout this presentation. It's to stop us from killing ourselves from within, to recognize that threat that's coming at us, and to do something about it. With that, there's my contact information. I gave you my card. Here's my smart guy, Dave Tackett. You're going to be hearing from him tomorrow about this whole system. And with that, I'll turn it over to you for questions. What questions do you have for me? Yes, sir, please.
So, with what you're talking about, with the way that we kind of collapsed by going too far right, too far left, do you think that America will ever be able to get to an edge to where I don't want to say nonpartisan, but very much more independent than we are now? Like, do you think that's achievable?
I think you're always going to have that spectrum, okay, across the American society. But what I want to do is, instead of pushing people further out here, educate them. And that's why I'm out in all the high schools that I can get into and giving this kind of presentation. Say, stop, think before you link. Don't let the Russians get inside your network. So first, it's this basic cybersecurity, again, that you guys know very well. Double factor authentication. You know, don't click on something that you shouldn't. Don't drop your phone and break it. You know, that's just be more aware of what's going on. Google did this study themselves. 60% of people believe the first thing they see. So back to that Stacey Abrams sign, the first thing you see is communist. You can come back and put up for 10 days of TV ads and social media ads saying she is not a communist. 60% are still going to believe it because that was the power of first impression. And that's what the Russians know. That's why they could hack the Ukraine election and just put it out. They knew they were going to be found out, but they knew on the first impression, people were going to see that this nutcase, you know, this nationalist who only had 1% of the vote, they're going to think that he actually had 37% of the vote. So, one, we need to either take him out or we need to get out and vote on our side, that kind of thing. So, it's more just an education piece as to what we need to do and make people aware. Thanks. There's a question over here. Yes, sir.
Secretary Warner, excuse me. You had a slide on examples of Russian misinformation kind of injected into social media, but Do you actually mean to tell me that Jeffrey Epstein really killed himself?
See, they don't care. They don't care what the truth is. They just want to cause confusion. They want to put out both sides of the story, that he did, that he didn't. All they want is confusion.
So that whole, like, them keeping that flap with the Russians, keeping that out, not wanting that exposed.
Bruh, what is up, dude? Excuse me, I gotta go to the back row. It's down in like 6 years.
Was there a question there or just a statement? Let me move back. Next question. Yes, please.
Is West Virginia specifically make any significant changes with regards to the election cycle next year in response to these things that have been going on?
We are in a number of ways. First, I talked about the HAVA money, the Help America Vote Act money that came in. We leveraged about $6.5 million that either we had or came in. We did 50-50 with the counties. So some counties hardened their physical, putting bars on windows. They put cameras up to make it harder to get in to do that. Most of the money was spent for cybersecurity and cybersecurity training. So twice now we've pulled all the clerks together to train them about this. And the first time we did it, they probably thought that we were half nuts. Then Harrison County got hit with a ransomware attack. Now Wood County's been hit with a ransomware attack. There have been 2 other places in West Virginia that allegedly have been hit. And so the clerks now understand, maybe we really are paying attention to this. So we're all getting them all to sign up for the EI-ISAC, the Election Infrastructure ISAC. And so now here's a good thing. The Department of Homeland Security actually printed posters for each one of our counties, each 55 counties, and they are now hanging on the clerk's walls. And if you go into any clerk's offices, I'd ask you to ask for it, and it'll tell you, if you have a cyber attack, here's who you call. If you have a national disaster, here's who you call. If the electricity goes out, here's who you call, that kind of thing. So we're training people just like in a military operation, continuing operations. See, right now, and we had this, and a bridge goes down, a tree falls across a bridge, or a tree falls across power lines, and reports are, we can't vote at this precinct because the electricity out, or we can't get to that precinct. How do I know that that's not a Russian hack that's coming in, or somebody just trying to mess with us? So right now we've paired up with the Fusion Center. And the Fusion Center here in West Virginia has 260 Fusion liaison officers all over the state. So I get a call from Mingo County, or I get an email that says the polls are down in a certain precinct in Mingo County, and I call the clerk and I can't get the clerk. I now have these resources, these Fusion liaison officers, and I can call. There's a lot of that kind of training, and we actually have exercise, tabletop exercises. We go and work with the National Guard. The National Guard's been wonderful. We have a National Guard asset sitting in our office doing nothing but watching for the election security. And so he reports to me on a weekly basis. So there are a lot of different things going on. It's like the duck that seems calm on the outside, but under the water he's paddling like hell. We're paddling like hell to try to stay ahead of it. Thanks for that question. Yes, please.
I grew up in the Alpine living area.
Okay.
In the last recent local election, and the recount. So I know that the scale of this local election is a lot smaller, but how am I going to distinguish between Russian influence and just invasion competency of people who are
Yeah.
I know that seems really easy to say,
Yeah.
but I think it goes back into the
Yeah. Every ballot that is cast in West Virginia has a voter verified paper trail. So we can go back and if the machines, if there's a miscount or a question about it, we can go back and actually check and do a hand paper count. We do audits after each election. All the machines are calibrated before and tested afterwards to make sure. So right now, Kentucky's the best example next door. The governor's race was decided by 5,000 votes. And the loser said, see, one of the biggest problems is the loser won't concede defeat, okay? Trump had said he wasn't sure he was going to do that, and then he gets elected, and then Hillary starts questioning the election, okay? Stacey Abrams in Georgia still hasn't conceded defeat 3 years after the fact. She's acknowledged that she's not the government, but she hasn't conceded defeat. There's a problem with that. At least down in Kentucky, the governor did concede here just in the last day or so. But when they did the recount, not one vote was different, okay? So because of the current testing systems and so forth, the audits and everything, you can be very assured. Again, my point was, why would somebody go to the risk of hacking a machine to change one vote? You're not going to change the outcome of an election, changing one vote or even one precinct. To change, especially a presidential, you'd have to know what are the swing states, what are the swing counties, what are the swing precincts, and how many votes do you have to change where you only change enough to win the election but not change enough to get caught. It's pretty way out there when you have all these other different means of not hacking an election but changing the outcome of the election by getting inside people's minds. Please.
So with the big surge in ransomware, and it sounds like, I mean, if Virginia's got paper trails for all their ballots, if West Virginia equipped, they've got the right idea. But do you see other states finally coming around to the fact that, hey, maybe we should have paper ballots on?
We do. In fact, we're going from 14 that didn't have it last election to I think 6, or only going to be 6 states that don't have it this time. So 44 states will have paper ballot backups. Yeah. Yeah, the movement's definitely in that direction. Other questions? Please.
What's the percentage of actual hacks into the system versus meddling with affecting outcomes?
The hacks are enormous. The attempted hacks, but the penetrations are virtually none. Okay, they got inside Illinois' database in 2016. That's what caused all this consternation. Okay, then there was something else that happened in the Arizona database, but we don't think it was the Russians. It was something on the black market, black internet, where they just penetrated, but they didn't do anything with it. Didn't sell it or anything. They didn't even change the Illinois. They just got access to it, but that scared everybody. Okay, so not one vote was changed anywhere in America. Not one. In the 2016 election. So that answers the question about the actual hacking and outcome. As far as this affecting the outcome, that's going to take psychologists. You would have to have interviewed people that could have been persuaded one way or the other, okay, beforehand, then had them actually get these memes and whatever, and then see how they voted, and then see if they had changed the outcome. And so it's just in the too difficult to do category. But there are people studying this. Robert Epstein and others now I've seen are showing that, and interestingly, Epstein is a Bill Clinton fan. He has a picture of Bill Clinton on his wall. He likes Bill Clinton and the Clintons, so tends towards the left or whatever. But he is saying that the algorithms that Facebook and Google are using are favoring the Democratic candidates. So he's saying that Facebook, Google, Twitter are doing to the American electorate what the Russians are doing. So if the Russians are favoring Trump, Google is favoring Hillary or the Democrats. So I don't care which side it is. We just need to educate the public that that's what's going on, and this is the main means that they're doing it. So watch what you believe when it comes across this. Please.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to say is it doesn't necessarily even have to be Russia. It's anybody that does, if let's just say I didn't agree with you.
Yeah.
I could be
Sure.
putting the same propaganda and,
Oh, yeah.
and changing.
And that's going on all the
That is
time
a
on
bigger
Facebook.
issue.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily Russia did this, Russia did this. It's so easy to veer people's opinions now.
It is.
It's so easy to, change the way a video shows or add font to a sign, just like you put there. It's something
Yeah.
we need to really pay attention and try to understand
Yeah.
what you're looking at before you make a judgment.
And you guys all get this. What is so egregious in this situation is that the Russians actually sent military operatives inside the United States, 25 military operatives inside. It was a psychological operation against the United States. So it's that nation-state thing, like what they did in Estonia. Now they're doing it here. They're doing it in the Olympics. That's particularly egregious to us. And elections just happens to be the focal point because we're so divided in America right now. Yeah. 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 And Russia, you have both the obvious open stuff that they want us to see, and then you have the stuff that's secret stuff that's going on, and we don't, I don't know what that is. 300 agencies know some of it, so yes.
Hopefully we got the next two questions.
Okay.
One is, like on election,
Hopefully I'll have 2 answers, but
like on election day, so you gave the example, are you really getting calls, fake calls, just election centers down?
I haven't, but how do you know it's fake or not? No, I haven't. But what my point is, up at Harvard, we went through exercises that did just that. The fake call would come in, the email would come in, or you would start getting goofy emails, and you could from clerks. And so now I'm spending my time calling that clerk, and if I can't reach him, going, how do I reach that clerk to find out whether it's real or not? So I'm wasting my time doing that and not watching. It's like the magician. You're watching the obvious stuff going on over here when they're picking your pocket over here.
Just like an exercise.
We've been through it. We've done it up there, and then we brought it back here to the state, to West Virginia, and done it twice now with our clerks here in West Virginia.
Can I add something
Yeah,
to
please.
that? So we maybe in West Virginia may not see that, but again, you know, like he said, there is a particular area maybe where concentration, where turnout, or keeping people from coming to vote is more important. And that goes to his point, that would more likely be a local phenomenon, because, you know, the more granular the election is, the more ability someone has to actually prevent turnout, encourage turnout, and sway a particular election. When you've got a municipal election that maybe the mayor's race is going to be decided by 5 or 10, then somebody making a phone call like that. So maybe we at the state level may not, or maybe we in West Virginia may not, but in Clendenin, someone might actually say, you know, that the junior high is closed, that polling place is closed, because that will impact a 5 or 10 vote swing or something like that. So, yeah, there are real world examples of that happening in the wild, but maybe not in the state of West Virginia. But I guarantee we probably see things like that at the local level, municipal elections.
You had a second question.
Yeah. I think my second question was, when it comes to like, I don't know if there's a way or if there's ideas or not, like, when there is misinformation, it is identified and say it gets picked up by the media or not. If you said first impressions are really big, I do know, I feel like oftentimes when that first impression is identified as false, it's never seen anywhere. Like, it's always buried in little print somewhere.
And that's why I'm getting out and doing this. Now, DHS shared just those 5 examples with me. There's probably hundreds or whatever. And it's just how, there are so many. And that's what they do, is they just push out whatever they can to see what sticks. And then when they got something that's starting to get traction, then they'll push more and more. And so much of this stuff is just basic military stuff. How many of y'all were in the military? When you're in the military, I mean, you plan. You have 2 up, 1 back, okay? You have 2 up, so that they're pushing. And when you get a breakthrough on this one, that's where you send the reserves in to go, you know, exploit that, you know, that penetration or whatever. And so they're just pushing stuff, and when something sticks, now they're going to go ahead and get a rally around it. So there may be an organic person, a peace activist or whatever, or a legitimate person who either likes Hillary or likes Trump and says, I'm going to have a little rally or whatever. They get wind of it. They hack into their account. Now, here's some quick numbers. You all may already be on top of this stuff, but one of these presentations that was given to us, they said that if China is trying to get inside your system, you have about 4 hours to figure it out. North Korea, you have about 2 hours and 20 minutes. Russia, you have about 19 minutes. That's how good they are. If they decide they're going to get inside your computer system, they start hacking stuff. Once they get in, they've taken over your system in that quick of a time. So, and when you start talking with students and everything, and that they can get inside your system and they can turn your camera on and see what you're seeing and turn your microphone on and listen. I mean, already Google is doing that, Alexa and so forth, Siri. There are cases now, you know, that where somebody gets murdered and the prosecutor's trying to get Siri to turn over, you know, what they heard on that phone. We're being listened to. It's kind of scary stuff. Big Brother's here. But it's really scary when somebody directs it and says, I'm coming after you. I want to see what you're up to. And they start penetrating. You have 19 minutes if the Russians are on to you. That's why you don't want to click on a link that you don't know what it is and so forth. Other questions? Something you'd ask there, and you mentioned, the weirdest one that I've seen was North Dakota. There was something that said, if you vote in North Dakota, you will lose your hunting license. Well, in North Dakota, a lot of people stayed home. There wasn't a big turnout. Okay, I mean that's pretty sophisticated. You know, and why North Dakota? You know, if we sit here and think, well, we're not a big state, don't worry about us. The Russians were messing with North Dakota's election. Okay, I'm sorry, I cut off somebody. Was there another question back there? Yeah.
I saw something from Amazon where they're talking about elections or software in the cloud, something like that. Just blows my mind. But I guess my question is, do you think that election infrastructure is something that seems to be not necessarily technologically efficient on purpose? So you mentioned some of the disparate ways that we stuff to it and how that kind of helps secure it. But you can't go to a central location and do it, but probably isn't maybe not efficient from a technology perspective. Do you consider that?
Yeah, you've really hit on the crux of a lot of this stuff. where do you trust technology, go to the cloud and do that? Or does that centralize stuff to where the one hack and you guys can be so sophisticated, you don't have to change a whole lot of votes. You know, out of 100, you only have to change 2 or 3 in a key precinct or whatever, and you change the outcome of the election, and who's going to pick up those 2 or 3 votes or whatever. So that's where I think right now, at least, I attend meetings twice a year with all the other secretaries across the United States, and we compare notes. And the cool thing about this, folks, and the same thing I saw up at Harvard, is it's not a Republican-Democrat thing. We all realize we're in this together, okay? So if they can hack into the Republicans, they can hack into the Democrats and so forth. So we all work together on this. And the short answer is we like our diversity. We like some people. 3 states vote by mail. You send your ballots out to the people in the mail. Colorado, Washington, Oregon. If we did that here in West Virginia, you'd have pizza parties saying, "Bring your ballots on down here. We'll fill them out for you. Get free pizza and stuff." I mean, there's not a good history here in West Virginia with election security and so forth. It just so you have to work with the culture and that kind of thing. So I trust technology to an extent, but I always do a cost-benefit analysis. Is there enough risk to outweigh the benefits? And so I'm working with the military. West Virginia is the first state in the union, first ever to allow people to vote on a mobile device. But it's only the soldiers and the overseas people, and that's because the soldier turnout, we were only getting 13% of active duty military votes counted. The rest of America is usually 60%, 65%, something like that. So why should soldiers only get 13% of their votes counted? It's because they're out on missions, they're out doing stuff. And so to me, the risk of somebody actually hacking this, getting in and changing a vote, here in West Virginia, just set you at ease, 998 ballot styles. So right there across Elk River is a different ballot style than right here in Charleston or whatever. So a Russian hacker is going to have to figure out what people to put on the ballot in Elkview versus here in Charleston or whatever. It's just too sophisticated, too problematic to change one vote, and then to get inside and try to hack the app inside the phone. All within this period of time that somebody has downloaded and said, "I want to vote." It takes about 10 minutes to do this, and the Russians would have to be onto it and inside there to change that vote. So I think the likelihood of them hacking and changing a vote is very small, but the benefit is huge to our soldiers. Yeah. When the polls close, say at 7 o'clock? When do you want to know the outcome of that election? About 7:01, 7:05, okay? And so let's use technology to give you what you want. Well, we do that, okay? See, and we got it's already there. The 7:05 results are not the real results. That's what we produce out of the Secretary of State's office, and it's about 5-6 days later or whatever, and we certify elections and so forth. That's when the official vote count comes in. But by automation, we can give you what you want, the press what it wants, we get it out there, but it's not certified until we actually do it with the paper backups. We've done the audits, okay? We've gone back, and if there's any deviation in the paper ballots when we audit them than what the electronic says, then we're going to go back and count them all by hand, okay? But typically, there's no deviation, and so those results stay. And that's just what happened in Kentucky. Just happened. Not one vote was changed. Or outcome.
And I'll just add one more thing. A lot of the things that you guys are asking about, take a little deeper dive into some of those concepts and those ecosystems tomorrow in my presentation.
Yeah, save your hard questions for him. Ask me the easy ones. Save the hard ones. Okay. He knows what he's talking about in your all's world.
I'm not trying to steal his thunder or even, or anything, but a lot of those questions that you guys are asking, we'll get into a little deeper dive and take a look at those ecosystems tomorrow in my presentation.
All right, one last one. Anybody? If not, you guys have been a great audience. I really appreciate your attention, and look forward to his presentation tomorrow. Thanks.